Hello and welcome to Bad Sydney Crime Writers Festival 2021. How good is it to be with human beings in real life that's not your home? I know, right? That's a celebration in itself. So that's fantastic. We are socially distanced. I am regretful that you all have your masks on. I'd love to see your beautiful faces, but unfortunately I can't. You'll just have to look at ours. We're allowed to have ours off while we're speaking, or you may not hear us. But welcome also those people on Zoom joining us from New South Wales who are watching from their local library or watching at home courtesy of their local library. So that's pretty cool as well. So to think we've got people in front of us and people on Zoom is something, probably the only good thing that came out of COVID. We acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional owners of this land and pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm Dani Vee and I'll be facilitating this wonderful panel here with these wonderful authors. I'm from the Words and Nerds podcast, where we talk about books and why books change the world. And I've spoken to over 400 authors. So if you haven't listened, I've spoken to a number of people in this room. So that would be wonderful. But we're going to talk today, the focus is on these wonderful people here to talk about why they turned to crime. Instead of introducing them and their bio, I'm going to do that sort of in the interview. So we're going to keep it interesting. But I would like to introduce Peter Papathanasiou. 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10. Cool. Thank you for the applause. Let's keep that going. Then they've swapped seats, so they've thrown me. Kelli Hawkins. How are you? Wonderful Pamela Hart. Laura Elizabeth Wharton. And now they're correctly sitting underneath their books. So isn't that lovely? Now, just before we get underway, as you've seen, we are following COVID protocols. Thank you all for wearing your masks. We've all checked in QR codes. We all know this, don't we? So just social distancing, and that's why we've had to restrict the people in the room. Hand sanitizers available. If you're feeling unwell, tell one of our wonderful volunteers. If you can make sure your mobile phones are on silent or muted. You are allowed to take photos, and some people have already done that. Please keep the flash off. And if you're going to share them on socials, which we'd love you to do, at Bad Crime Sydney hashtag, or the at Bad Crime Sydney. At the end too, so I want you to put your thinking caps on now, because at the end, we're going to have 15 minutes of questions. And a lot of the panels I've been to so far, there's, silence, awkward silence at that point. So if you have a question around that 15-minute mark, please put your hand up and ask it. There is no silly question. There's only great questions. The danger is if you don't ask questions, I'm just going to keep talking. So we'd much rather hear from you. And we also get the opportunity to answer questions from our Zoom people as well. So that's pretty cool. All right, we're going to get underway right now. I'm going to put each one of them under the spotlight. 4 people on the panel. It's my job to get them to each entertain you equally. So let's see how we go. Pamela, we're going to start with you in the hot seat. You are an award-winning best-selling author of more than 35 books.
40 now.
Oh, my goodness. From between when I wrote my notes, from between when I
literally a book came out last
wrote
week,
5 books in that time. Children's author, historical fiction, fantasy writer, and we're talking a bit about romance in the green room too, which is very interesting.
Just started on that.
Now, I love the blurb on the front of Digging Up Dirt. Renovations are hell, and that's before you find the body beneath the floorboards. Bit of a twofold question here for you all. I need a really short building elevator pitch because we want to get more into, the guts of the books. The 10-second elevator pitch, and then, Pamela, why did you turn to crime?
So Digging Up Dirt is the first of the Poppy McGowan series. The second is A List for Death, which is coming out next year. Poppy is renovating her little house in Annandale and they find bones under the floorboards. She gets some archaeologists in to find out if they're human or not. And one of those archaeologists, who is an old enemy from her last job at the Museum of New South Wales, is killed. And so Poppy is a suspect, but also she works for ABC Kids as a researcher and scriptwriter, and she's drawn into the kind of media investigation of that story as part of her kind of job. That's the elevator pitch.
Fantastic. Yeah. So why, Pamela, 40 books in, get that right, why did you turn to crime? Because you have just an amazing ability to write in any genre.
I am, excuse me for the language, but my friend Ron says I'm a bit of a genre slut. I love writing. I love reading a whole lot of different genres. And, they say you should write what you love, but I love all of them, you know. And what happened was I had written an historical novel called The Desert Nurse, which was based or inspired by the fact that my grandfather's life had been saved by good nursing after Gallipoli. And it was around a nurse in Cairo during that time. And it's not a grim book because I don't write grim books, but the research was very grim. And I came out of that going, I just want to write something I don't have to research at all, like no research, and something that's happy. I want to write happy and fun and something that's lighthearted. And some friends said, you're always talking about writing a murder mystery, write a murder mystery. And so I decided I would do that, but I would not do any research. So I gave Poppy my little house in Annandale, which we did find bones under the floorboards, but they were chopped bones. And I gave her my friends, and I gave her my odd job at the ABC, which, you know, I used to work for ABC Kids. Yeah, so I just didn't do any research, and I had an enormous amount of fun writing it. So I turned to crime to have fun.
I love that. That's interesting. I read crime for fun, so I don't know what that says about us now. And if only I'd known, I could have described you as you described yourself in your bio.
It's true. Wow.
Fabulous. Thank you for that, Pamela. Now, Peter, you're next in the hot seat. Your background is as a research geneticist, which is very interesting and impressive. You have a Master of Arts in Creative Writing, and you're author of a memoir, Little One. The Stoning is your debut crime novel. So little elevator pitch, and then I want to know why you turned to crime.
Thanks. So the stoning takes place in a small outback town, and it opens with a woman who's found tied to a tree and stoned to death. She's a local school teacher, and a detective is sent in to investigate the crime. He's a Greek Australian like me, named George Manolis, and I set up the town to be a metaphor for Australia, in that it's a place of cultural, racial, sexual diversity. And I remember I started writing the book when I was in the UK, and I had an agent there at the time, and she said, look, I always like that you write about important things. It's a very sort of simple way of conveying, you know, something that resonated with her. She'd read an earlier book of mine, and I thought, if that's what she's picked up on, I'm going to keep running with that. So I was away from Australia at the time, and I thought, you know, what issues are there? What is something that distinguishes the country? And maybe being away from Australia gave me the clarity to identify what those things were. I looked in my own background of a son of migrants and grandson of refugees. And it all sort of started to come together in my mind of this small town with an immigration detention center that's parked on the outskirts, ostensibly been done to stimulate the local economy, but also partly for convenience, sort of out of sight, out of mind. And you have white Australians, you have European Australians, you have an Indigenous community, and then you have the newest arrivals who have come as irregular maritime arrivals to Australia. So it was set up to be a metaphor for Australia and to talk and explore about those tensions, those conflicts, those issues that exist. And why did I do that in the context of crime and not, say, literary fiction, because these are some topics that lend itself to something like that. It was really a crime exposes something about a community or a place. Questions get asked. Things are under the spotlight, and it was just a great prism through which to explore those topics. And there's a structure that comes with crime as well. So for a debut novelist, it felt like a really safe place to explore that.
I love that. We've got crime as safe and fun.
About important things.
Yeah, and about important things. But I love that because crime is all of those things. And I want to really touch on that later on in our chat. Now, Laura, you're next in the hot seat. An author of short stories and novels, including The Love of a Bad Man, shortlisted for the Victorian Premier's Literary Award and Ned Kelly Award. Beautiful Revolutionary was shortlisted for the 2019 Prime Minister's Literary Award, the Australian Literature Society Gold Medal, and the Kathleen Mitchell Award. So impressive. Elevator pitch for your book, as well as why did you turn to crime?
So, is this working?
We good?
So The Newcomer is a bit of an unconventional murder mystery. It focuses on the perspective of the victim, 29-year-old.
Can we have the mic up, Alex, if possible?
Right up close to you.
Is that better? Yeah, that's working.
Thank you.
Yeah, so The Newcomer is an unconventional murder mystery. It focuses on the perspective of the murder victim, Paulina Novak, and her mother, Judy, after Paulina's murder. And it's set on a Pacific island off the coast of Australia called Fairfolk, which is strongly inspired by Norfolk Island, where I spent time when I was researching the book. Why I turned to crime, I guess my work has always been crime adjacent. My short story collection, The Love of a Bad Man, all the stories were told from the perspectives of women who'd been in relationships with infamous bad men from history. And a lot of those men were serial killers, and some of the women were killers themselves. So I already enjoyed, I guess, exploring people who were close to crime, and I think I was especially interested in that gray area between perpetrator and victim. So a lot of the women I was writing about were accomplices to crime. And then with my novel, Beautiful Revolutionary, that was historical fiction, but also largely based around a historical crime, which was the Jonestown massacre, in which over 900 people died, mass murder suicide. And again, with that, I was exploring the perspectives of victims. I was exploring the perspectives of people who were close to planning the massacre. So I think it felt quite natural to write a more conventional crime novel with The Newcomer. I think the thing that The Newcomer has going for it that my previous work didn't is that it has a lot more suspense, because previously I was basing things on historical events. With this, I was much more letting the events unfold in a fictional way and keeping people guessing. But I don't see The Newcomer as a straight crime novel. It is very much manipulating the conventions of the genre in order to suck people in. And the point of it looks like a whodunit when you first get into it, but it's not just a whodunit, it's about a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea that you've always been flirting with crime, and then now you're in it. So yeah, fabulous. And I really like that sort of subversion of the genre, which I want to talk about later as well. I don't know if we might need 4 more hours, I'm not sure. Kelli, you've worked as a political journalist and written novels for adults and children. Your novel, Other People's Houses, is a wonderful read. Now, I want you to give us a little elevator pitch and tell us, what do you get out of crime writing and why did you turn to crime?
Yeah, sure. So I guess Other People's Houses is about real estate, I guess, basically, but it's about grief as well. So it's about a woman whose young son died 10 years previously, and she's still grieving. So she's an alcoholic or borderline alcoholic, and she goes to open houses regularly, like a few in a weekend, and takes a memento from each house that she visits. And she becomes obsessed with one house in Wahroonga, a really beautiful house, and the people that live there. And the son reminds her of what her son would have been like, if he'd grown up to be a 15-year-old boy. So she becomes obsessed with the family, and she knows the mother who lives there from back when she was at university. So it's about grief, and it's about secrets, I suppose, that people have, and there's a lot about, I guess, real estate, which is a very Sydney thing as well. So and how did I come to it? I guess it was almost by accident, really. I started writing when my kids were little, so I started writing children's books and even young adult books. But then the idea for this book came to me just as often ideas do, I guess, just in the night, really. And I wrote it down, just the idea of a woman who goes to open houses and takes something from each house. And that is really, it's a crime book. It's going to be a thriller, that sort of book. So I kind of never really plan to write adult books until this one. So yeah, it was a bit of an accident, but but it's been interesting, and it's to write something different than what I was doing has been great. So
wonderful. I just love how all of these novels, they're so different yet fit under the umbrella of crime. And I'd love to hear from all of you afterwards about what resonates with you about crime novels, because obviously we're all crime lovers here, and I'm always interested as to what is it about crime novels that resonate with you. And that's my next question to all of you. I mean, we know crime is huge in Australia, and just, you know, it's always been big, but it's kind of had this bit of, you know, extra surge, and people just love crime, and I'm one of those people as well. And so why do you think crime novels resonate so much with readers today? Pamela, you're going to start with you.
I've thought about this, and I think there are the two things about crime novels resonate. One is nice and one not so nice. So the nice thing is that we usually get justice at the end, you know. So Dorothy Sayers reckoned that crime fiction was the most moral of all genres, because it usually ends with the arrest or discovery of the murderer, and that's great, and that it's like a happy ending. It lifts us up. It reassures us that the body politic is secure. It restores us to a state of balance. But the other side of crime is that humans are violent. You know, we're apex predators. We like violence, you know, we like it. We would all be at the Colosseum, you know, we would be. We like to think we wouldn't, but we would. And we get that vicarious violence through crime. And even though, you know, we like to tell ourselves that that's not true, and that really we're only interested in the characters and the way that crime novels, like the murder exposes things, as Peter was saying, deep down, you know, we like a bit of biff.
And we can explore it safely, perhaps, by reading it.
Safely,
Sorry,
that's
Peter,
right.
were you going to add something?
No, I was just going to riff off that and say, I don't. We're maybe not like crime. Some people do, but it's more the fascination with it. And the modern arena is the sporting arena where people get tribal, and they do get to see people engage in physical, conflict.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll throw to you, Peter.
Danger, a little bit of danger there too.
Why crime? Well, as you said, I'm just trying to. I guess it is that the one thing I can add that you haven't said, I agree with both those aspects of good and bad, is the idea of it being a puzzle.
Yeah.
So we're challenged, and we're trying to piece it together and work out who the culprit is. So there is something
satisfying.
Yeah. It's a challenge, and it's something that
intellectually engaging.
That, and hopefully, a book can also take people on a character journey and find out something about the world. But within each crime book, there is a puzzle that has to get solved. So I think that's why, whether it's a book or a film or a TV show, there is that neural process that's going on, as well as entertainment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've talked to a number of readers about crime as well, and you tell me what you think. I love being able to, about 70%, 80% in the book. That's when I really like to be able to crack the crime. I don't want to do it too early because it spoils it for me. But around 70% of the book, I can go, oh yes, I've guessed it. That's kind of the cool bit.
Interesting you say that. Just quickly, I wrote my book as part of a master's in London, and what they said to us at the beginning was, you're going to write a better book if you start off writing it and you don't know who the culprit is.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because you're on the journey with the reader.
A little bit. And if you know who it is from the outset, you're going to subconsciously write in a certain way.
Yeah.
But they also said, if you get 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way through the book and you haven't worked out who it is,
You're in trouble.
then you're in trouble.
Then you're in trouble.
I got 2/3 of the way through and then changed my mind. I thought I knew, and then I
So
thought, actually,
fine.
that's a bit boring.
I
I'll
think
do
that's
something
great.
else. Yeah.
Then I've also heard from readers who don't want to work it out at all and who just want to just go
I
for
just
the
want the ride.
Hand up here who wants to guess, that is hell-bent on guessing. Yeah, me too. The other people are just happy for the ride. I love that. I love both. You can read crime in so many different ways. Kelli, what about you?
I agree with everyone, but I guess the other thing that I like reading crime for is the motivation. So it's just you just don't know what people are thinking, or you just don't know anyone really. So I guess there's that. And as a writer, it's interesting to wonder why someone would commit a crime. So there's
Particularly
that.
the husband in yours. I mean, we never really know.
No, that's
why.
right. No.
No.
And you don't know why, I think, but it's interesting to try and understand, why someone would do something, and for the reader to, I guess, come along for that ride, and also as a writer to try and figure it out, because people do things for a reason usually, I guess.
Not so much the who done it, which you can guess, and it's the why done it.
And that's so much more interesting, isn't it, if you've got the both coming together. I'm sorry, Laura, this is hard because I've left you to last and they've already come up with maybe everything. You've got anything to add to that, why crime resonates with readers?
No, I think Pamela's answer was great. Like I think it's basically a safe way of exploring dark things. I think people enjoy the neatness of it because life isn't that neat. Yeah.
And I think from speaking to readers and writers about crimes, I do a lot of crime on the podcast because I just like it. It's reflective of society too. And it was really interesting when I was talking on the podcast about 4 continents, 4 critics. We had critics from around the world, and also it's contextual. And so we had a critic who was speaking about South African writers, and because the place she was from, there was quite a lot of societal violence. She said, well, our books always have justice in it. Justice is the main theme. So I find it interesting that crime does so much. You've got characters, you've got love, you've got romance, you've got reflection of society, you've got kind of that flirting with immorality and exploring our own darkness and our own hypotheticals. What would I do if I was in this situation? I'd like to stand up at the Colosseum, but maybe I've got front row tickets. Like, I don't know, And so that puzzle as well. So I think you're absolutely right. The crime just has everything. I reckon.
I think it's probably matured over the years.
Totally.
Yeah. More complex, more layered.
Readers expect more. I always think it's no longer, the dead girl in the underwear anymore, because that's kind of, really sort of about 80s kind of crime, and the readers, they want more. So yeah, it's definitely become more sophisticated. Absolutely. Now, you do explore important issues amongst all of this. I mean, your crime is fun, it's a puzzle, it's a challenge, great characters, but beneath that, which I think really adds to the crime, are those really important topics and issues that you do explore within your novels. Now, Peter, you touched on it before on the stoning about, racism in the Outback and prejudice. Why was that really important for you to explore in this particular novel?
Well, it's not just racism in the Outback. It's
everywhere.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
And I got to be careful, I guess.
Don't be careful.
You're crime writers. Don't be careful.
Well, every country has flaws. No country's perfect, and I felt my job as a writer was to hold up a mirror to Australia. Show it to its own people and also to the world, and say, this is our country for better or worse, and every country has its own issues. This is what I've identified as ours. I'm from a culturally diverse background. I've experienced racism in my life, and you don't necessarily have to have identified it. I'm a bloke, though. I haven't necessarily experienced sexism, whereas my panelists would definitely have more than me. So these are topics, these are problems that we have within our society, and I don't think a book can solve them, but it can showcase them, and hopefully do it in a way that is entertaining, so that you don't didactically bash people over the head with it, but if you can come in through the back of their head and have it spring out like that,
I like
taking
that.
them on a journey. Yeah, someone told me that once, always stuck with me. Don't go through the front of people's heads, try and come through the back.
Nice.
yeah, it was just the topic that I felt that I could write about with some experience, and that was still prevalent. We've come a long way.
But we got work to do.
Yeah, but
so
there's
much.
always some work to do.
Yeah. But where else do you acknowledge that? And I mean, I know you said one book can't make the difference, but then it opens up conversations, and it opens up thought, and it opens up, the ability to go, yeah, we are a great country, but, we got work to do, as does everybody. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I think that's really, really important. Laura, in your novel, The Newcomer, it's the complexities of relationships, family relationships. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so the novel begins from the perspective of Paulina's mother, Judy. And I really wanted to do that because before showing the dead girl's body, I wanted to show the person who cares about her the most, who will be grieving for her the most, and putting the impact of the crime before the crime itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the mother-daughter relationship in this book was just really fascinating to me because of the kind of relationship it is. They're very loving, they love each other very much, but it's also a very combative relationship. And I see it as a codependent relationship for both of them. Paulina, she needs her mother. She has addiction. She's alcoholic, and she has a long-term eating disorder. And at the beginning of the novel, she's 28 and still living at home with her mum, and really, really craving independence. And that's one reason that she moves to this island. And Judy, she's a mother who needs to be needed, and because Paulina needs her so much, she gets something out of that as well. So I thought, because it was this kind of relationship, and because Judy doesn't really have much of an identity outside of being Paulina's mother, the particular effect that the crime has on her, obviously it's always going to be devastating for any mother, but I wanted to really explore how this crime affected this particular mother, because it is such a close and complicated relationship, and so fraught, and codependent.
I really like that. And I did read somewhere that apparently the most complex relationships do come from mothers and daughters, which is really interesting. I know myself didn't appreciate my own mother till I got out of those 20s, Pamela, Digging Up Dirt, you also explore complicated relationships, but I wanted to ask as well, was this really fun to write? Because it felt fun to read. It felt really fun to read.
It was enormous fun to write. As I said, I didn't do any research because I just gave Poppy the life that I was leading when I was her age, basically. And I may have, the love interest in the story is an archaeologist. My husband is an archaeologist.
Oh, isn't this cute?
Non-fiction, isn't it?
Non-fiction.
Really?
Never killed anybody, never had anybody killed in my house.
Yet.
But yes, it was enormous fun. And in terms of the kind of serious elements of it, I kind of take a bit of a swing at right-wing church-based parties, mainly because I wanted suspects, and and I felt that really to get it working, because I didn't know who the murderer was, to get it working, I had to have people that I didn't like. So we have a whole range of people from a very right-wing religious group, and that was also my kind of commentary on how politics is being infiltrated by that.
See what we can do with crime?
See what you can do with crime. But yes, it was enormous fun to write. And so was the second one, where we deal with kind of celebrity media, and Poppy gets photographed with a rock god, and, things go crazy. Because that's what this series is about. It is a more lighthearted look at people being killed, which seems odd, I know, but there's room for that in the genre, I think. And
we were talking about this before. The genre is so broad, and there's so many little subgenres under crime, so there is something for everyone. But
hard. This one's hard to classify because it's not really cozy.
Yeah.
Melbourne Dimmicks called it charming crime fiction, and I'm right there for that.
Charming crime.
Charming crime
Pamela,
fiction.
what were we talking about before in the green room? Breastfeeding noir.
Breastfeeding
Have you heard of that?
subgenre.
Right. I just discovered this year. It's just a crime set in a world post-birth. And if you have had children, you could relate. The no sleep, crying baby, you could probably commit a few crimes.
Yes, but also that person is often the investigator.
Yeah.
And they're on the edge already. You know?
And add 1 minute sleep to that.
That's right.
Yeah. So I love, we'll talk about subgenres if we have the time, but I love all those ideas of, you know, those subgenres that keep coming up, and I keep finding more. It's incredible.
How about witch crime, right? Witch cozy crime, that's a subgenre.
Wow.
Yeah.
And sunshine crime as well.
Sunshine crime.
Yeah. It's
So
like
many.
in Miami, sort of
So
Gold
many.
Coast crime. Yeah, very cool. We could probably make up a few today. So if you've got an idea, we'll just make up a genre. Kelli, other people's houses, you explore grief, you explore perfection, the ugliness underneath that perfection and what lies beneath the surface. Why was this interesting for you to explore?
I guess it comes back to character again, and I think the thing that interests me most when I write is people and their characters, and the fact that we don't ever really know someone, and we never really know, we just never really know them. So the people's lives can look perfect from we just need Instagram and stuff to see how that works. And I guess houses is a good way of showing that, because when we have our open houses, it's not real. It's just perfect, and we don't really know, what goes on in that house. We only know what they let us see, but also they're inviting us into their house, and we can look around, and it's we don't have to look through the windows. You can go in and snoop around.
I love them. I honestly love them.
So I guess there's that element about what how we just don't know what goes on under the surface, and how ugly that can be, I suppose, which I just find fascinating.
It is fascinating and curious, because I think we all are a little bit curious about how everyone lives their lives, because we can come out here and talk about how we live our lives, we can put it on Instagram, but then there's that real behind closed doors, which I think we're all very interested in. Is it just me that when you're going for a walk and someone's curtains are open?
Oh no, I love it.
Hope it's not just me, otherwise I don't do that. So now we will get to sub-genres, and Pamela, I wanted to call yours cozy, but now I'm not. I'm going to call it charming
crime fiction. Yeah, look,
crime.
cozies are kind of defined more in the American and UK
probably
market.
right. So I like charming. Can we go with charming?
I think charming is great.
Lighthearted, fun, and it was really fun to read. And that's what I felt that. I needed to ask you, did you have fun writing it? Because it felt like you did. I felt that vibe throughout it. I do want to ask you, when you're writing in this particular genre we've just made up, charming noir, what were the challenges? What were the rewards?
The rewards are that people like it. I mean, honestly, I've never had reviews this good for any of the books. This is my 39th book, and the reviews have been the best I've ever had. And I think because I had fun, and it comes through.
It does come through. It really does.
The challenges are the same as writing any book. You've got to get your characters developed. And in a murder mystery, you've got to have, because it's the kind of classic mystery, she gets killed, we have to find out who done it. The people have to be sufficiently complicated that they might kill someone. And you have to give each of them a different motive. And so there's quite a lot of that kind of development process. And because I didn't know who the murderer was, quite like maybe 80% of the way in, then each of them had to be viable. And so that's quite a challenge. And then, of course, it's just the writing. I mean, first draft's lovely. First draft, because I'm profoundly committed to radical editing, first draft is fun, because I know I'm prepared to change it and do as many drafts as necessary in order to make it work. But when you get to the 8th draft, I've just done the copy edit on the second book, and I appear to have used the word just 500 million times in this book. there's always a word, but in this book, it's like people are going, I'll just do this, or I just went into this. And I hear it now when I hear myself say it.
How'd that affect the word count when you had to delete all of those?
All of those. And so I know what I'm going to be doing next time is just do a search and replace on all the just.
Interesting.
But in the next book, it'll be a different word. So yeah, that was quite confronting. I'm as I'm going through and there's another one and another, I'm getting more and more embarrassed. And I actually apologized to my copy editor.
I love that.
So sorry. But yeah, so there are things like that, which are just, it happens in every genre.
Now, Pamela has to pay us $1 for the rest of the interview every time she says just. I'll share it with you. We'll buy coffees at the end.
No, I can't see it.
Pamela, I do want to ask you, I've often heard, your first draft sounds with ease and it sounds quite magical because you're happy to radically edit.
Yeah.
So is there any point in the writing process where you lose confidence?
Oh, all the time. I lose confidence in the first draft.
Okay.
But once you've gone over it a couple of times, it becomes boring to you.
Mm.
And the clues that you've left seem unbelievably obvious. Like everybody is going to see who the murderer is on page 3 or
not
whatever.
Because you didn't even know.
No, but by then I knew,
Yeah,
and you go back and you put in more clues to once you've decided who it is. And so you do get to the point where you think, this is crap. Nobody is going to want to read it. It's not original. Why would anybody read this book? And that's when it's really good to have a partner or a publisher, or preferably both, who pat you and go, it's a good book, it's fine, But yeah, there's always a point where you hate the book. And the more books you write, the more you go, oh, this is just that moment. You just know that that's the moment.
Acknowledge the moment. No, it's going to pass.
That's it. It's always happens.
When do you love the book again? When it's in your hands?
When I get my first reader response.
Okay.
I think. I mean, it's great when it's in your hands. There's that moment, never gets old.
Yeah.
But the first time a trusted reader comes back to me and says, oh God, I love this. It was fantastic. It's like, oh, thank you, God, thank you, God. Because
I don't hate you anymore, little book. I don't hate you anymore.
I don't hate you anymore, little book. No, in fact, I quite like you now.
We've made up. Kelli, Other People's Houses, psychological thriller. Would you be happy with the description of that?
Yeah, I guess so. It's hard. Labels are difficult.
Yeah, they are.
Because I didn't really even think of it as a crime book when I wrote it.
Yeah, it does have that psychological thriller edge, I guess. And I guess my question is, why were you drawn to it? But I guess you weren't drawn to it. But how do you feel about it now?
Well, I love reading those sort of books. So I think you're drawn to what you enjoy reading, which I do like to read widely as well. But I definitely love reading crime. So, so I guess... what was the question again? Sorry.
Just why you were drawn to that particular subgenre.
I think the idea didn't give me much choice, I suppose.
You're probably right.
It was going to be that sort of book when I had the idea for it. So I didn't really feel like I had a different choice with it.
Ideas come with feelings.
Yeah, definitely.
I like that. I love the idea of not having a choice. To me, then you're on the right track when you don't have a choice anymore. Laura, I've heard your book being described as having an unlikable character, and you talked about the subversion, which I love unlikable characters because I think they're very interesting. Who wants a likable character in your crime? Not me. But you talked about subversion of the genre as well. So talk us through about that and why you thought that was important and how difficult that was to write.
Yeah, it's funny that, one of the first things people say about this book is, oh, Paulina is so unlikable.
I think that.
I didn't either. I actually really like her personally. Do
you think it's funny? Sorry to interrupt you though. People tend to say that more about female characters who are complex. Oh, they're unlikable. Well, no, they're just a real complex human being. Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, I digress.
Yeah, from the beginning, I really liked her. I think she's funny and vivacious, and as somebody I get very anxious. I'm quiet, I overthink things. So the fact that I got to spend time with a character who's so unlike me, I just found it really refreshing and cathartic. But yeah, the unlikability question, I didn't set out to write an unlikable character, but I was aware that she was complex and difficult. And one thing, when I was writing this book, I was watching The Bachelor a lot. And I was just thinking about those women who, if you've watched a single episode of these TV shows, you have the good girls, the wife material, the women who they walk on camera and like sparkly music plays. And then you get the entertainment.
The rest of us.
the entertainment, the ones who, you know, are desperate or drama queens or, you know, villains. They get drunk at the cocktail parties, they start fights. And I think as a society, we're used to watching these women and being entertained by them, but we also like seeing them humiliated and torn down. And we're not used to empathizing with them. And I think especially with like women, you know, women viewers, we like to think, oh, I'm not that kind of woman. And so we kind of withhold our empathy a little bit. So I guess I wanted to put the reader in the uncomfortable position of knowing from the outset something horrible has happened to this woman. And now here she is in all her messiness. And what do you think about that? And really forcing the reader to sit with those uncomfortable feelings.
Yeah, no, I love those uncomfortable feelings. I think the more we do that, the more we actually represent real women and not, like you said, those caricatures of, are you a villain, are you a wife material? Like, what is that? You know, so I think that's really important to hold a mirror up to that. I love that about your book. And I didn't think the character was unlikable. Loved her, actually. Now, Peter, your book has been referred to by Chris Hammer, who's just left us as the photographer, as Outback Noir, with the noir dialed up. Like, I'd get that as a t-shirt if I were you. But anyway, tell us what Chris Hammer meant by this.
Oh, I mean, it's a great compliment coming from Chris.
Absolutely.
Well, Outback Noir is, potentially how the crime world sees Australia at the moment.
Yeah.
It's something unique about us, you know, our space, our isolation, our dangerous animals, which, you know, don't underestimate what the crocodile hunter and was it Paul Dundee, Paul Hogan, you know, the
or Steve Irwin.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
The impact that they had on the world and how, you know, we're seen. So I guess I wanted to, you know, not make those tropes caricature, but treat them seriously. That we do have an environment that is hostile, and animals that can kill you, and people that can kill you. They often end up in these places. They're on the run. I think what Chris was getting at was that I just took it to an even darker place. And I remember when I was working with my agent, they actually told me to pare some things back.
Wow. Can I read that version?
It's there somewhere, but that, you know, I guess when you're writing the book first draft or second draft, you're so focused on getting it right that you might slather it on with a bit of a trowel. And the old adage is you'd rather do that and then cut it out than not have enough of that.
Yeah.
But the old adage is also less is more. So you need to have enough of that in there to give that sense. So I think that's what he was getting at. And you can potentially, it becomes what's the phrase? Like, well, exploitation of poverty and people who are down on their luck and not turning that into a form of entertainment, but portraying it as reality.
Yeah.
And not necessarily embellishing it, but just saying this is the stark reality of what it's like in this country or parts of this country.
I love that. I love all of that. It's been such an interesting chat. We are around about 15 minutes toward the end, so I'm just going to I'm happy to keep talking forever and asking questions. But if you have something to ask, just please, you know, raise your hand if there's anyone on Zoom, and we can. Yes, I see a hand. I'm very excited. What would you like to ask? Gratuitous. Yeah, I'm just going to repeat your question. Thank you for that question. It's a great question. I'm just going to repeat it for the people at home watching from Zoom. Now, the question was there from an amateur writers group. So congratulations. Can't wait to be having you up on this panel one day. How do you balance empathy, sympathy with the criminal and the victim? Because obviously we're interested in the criminals, the psychology of the criminals, but we don't want to glamorize that, because we need to give some light to the victims and we need to honor the victims, even if they're fictional victims. So how do you balance that as a writer? Pamela, can I start with you?
I actually tried to balance it kind of literally, because my victim gets killed at the beginning of the book. You know, it's the first turning point in the book. So it's about 25% in. I deliberately put a scene later in the book where she has nobody, and she's actually left everything she has to the museum where she works, and Poppy and her Julianne's boss, who is a friend of Poppy's, and go to her house. And what I did, I put that scene in deliberately so we wouldn't figure that Julianne was a real person. And we find stuff out about Julianne with them kind of collecting all her clothes for Vinnie's and going through her. And there's also a plot point in there as well, that they find information in her desk. But the scene was there primarily to remind us that this person that we've been investigating the death of was a real person who had a particular kind of life, and raised the question there of she was somebody who adapted herself to every male that she came in contact with. Everybody she was involved with, she kind of was whatever they wanted her to be. And I wanted to raise the question of what does that to someone? You know, okay, Poppy didn't like her, but why was she like that? And I didn't necessarily want to answer that question. I have my own ideas about childhood sexual abuse, but I just wanted to raise that question for the reader to remind them that Julianne was a real person. So I did that. I kind of deliberately put that at about the 2/3 point in the story, where I thought possibly we've lost sight of Julianne as a person, just to remind people of the victim.
They're really humanizing
her,
that person.
and to make people curious about her again as a person, rather than just as a thread in the story.
I think, Peter said it before about, readers expect more, crimes become more sophisticated. And I think that's what our readers expect as well, not just the about the criminal, the person who commits the crime, but about the whole picture. Laura, let's throw to you, because you sort of started this conversation earlier. Can you expand on how you balance that in yours?
Yeah. I mean, I think as a writer, I'm not really interested in the psychology of cold-blooded killers. Yep. People who do things because they enjoy doing bad things. I think that can only go so far. Mm-hmm. I'm much more interested in the people adjacent to them who, accommodate them or who make justifications for them. And yeah, with the newcomer in particular, I have a victim who doesn't fit conventional expectations of victimhood. She does some bad things at times. She pushes people. She at times uses people, lies sometimes, drink drives. She's doing reckless things, and she's doing things that are seen as immoral throughout the story. So I think I'm much more interested in like ordinary-ish people and the situations they get themselves into and the justifications that they make once they've done bad things.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Kelli? How do you balance the two?
I guess mine was a bit different because I don't have someone killed as it goes along. So it's sort of, there's flashbacks to show, it's more showing grief, and a bit like Laura's, like I was really surprised by how many people did not like the main character, because I liked her. And again, so many people said they didn't like her at all.
Thing that they both drink.
Yeah, they both, yeah.
And they're women.
A lot, and they're women, and
so yeah, that I guess that so part of it, I guess the balance was me. I was trying to make her likable, and I thought she was. But yeah, a lot of people said, God, she was really annoying. And but that she was suffering, and I suppose that's part
Aren't
of
we
the
all
balance.
a bit annoying?
Well, I think so. So I guess she was suffering, and so I assume, or I would hope that people who maybe didn't like her would at least understand why she was doing the things that she was doing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I really want to pick up another conversation another time about the complexity of particularly female characters and why readers, not readers here, but why some readers have difficulty with that. I had a conversation with someone before about, every woman should have a difficult woman t-shirt and wear it proudly. It's not an insult, it's a compliment. Oh, Peter, I'm just throwing my pen lid. Peter, tell me about the balance. I was getting excited.
I'm not sure I can add anything that hasn't already been said, just other than to, humanize your characters, make them three-dimensional, make them flawed. As we're talking about The Bachelor, which I haven't watched, but I've read about it, that there's villains and heroes and princesses, and every story has that in it. So you have to have, you kind of almost have to have those characters as characters, but that there's no people that are inherently evil, that they just do evil things. So that and that's usually in some motivating factor that causes them to do something like that. I think that contributes to making a three-dimensional character. And yeah, I've seen in my book where the detective is going about the case in a very perfunctory, matter-of-fact way. He's dealt with many of these, and then he comes up with the victim, and actually he says it's the hardest point in any case when he finds out about their background, all the relationships they've had, and then that they're not just a victim, they're a human being, basically. So I made a point to have that moment for the detective that kind of caused him to stop, and that he always hated about every case, because it made it wasn't just a job. It is a job for him because he's a policeman, but at the same time he's a human being.
Did that answer your question? Wonderful. Thank you for that question. Good luck with your writing. Question here. Great. I'll just repeat that for our people watching at home. Once you've written crime, what's next for you? Are you going to keep forging forth through the crime, or have you been too traumatized by the crime? You're going to go somewhere else. So what next? Let's start with you, Laura.
I don't think I'm done with crime forever. I'm sure I'll come back to it, but I think I'm done for now. And my next project is short stories. So interconnected short stories. But yeah, I think I will come back to it. I think I like to do something different with each book and challenge myself in different ways.
Do you think you need to reset after crime a little bit?
I think I more need to reset after doing 2 very long novels in a row. Yeah.
Pamela, what's next for you?
Well, the second Poppy book is next, comes out next June. And I'd be quite happy to write about Poppy for quite some time. But in terms of changing how I write, these were really the first books where I had no idea what was going to happen. So I'm not a detailed plotter, but I always knew the end of whatever I was going to write. And obviously you can't know the end if you don't know who the murderer is. So I think that's kind of freed me up a bit for other books as well, that I might be more prepared to start a novel without knowing where it was going.
I love that. What about you, Kelly? How's it changed you as a writer, and what's next?
I'm doing another one similar. I found that I'd like to get better, I guess. So I'm going to continue on that path. But I also write for kids at the same time. So I alternate. So I've got a kids book that I've just finished editing, and then I'll be back on the adult book. So I guess that gives me a bit of lightness. So otherwise, I can see it would be.
Yeah, I do children's books also. So
it's kind of nice because you put it away and then suddenly it's all happiness.
Yeah.
Or in my case, different. Yeah.
I write nonfiction. I mean, I've written children's fiction, but I can't do 2 fictions at the same time. So I write nonfiction picture books for children at the moment, along with
at the same time.
Adult novels.
Yeah. I like doing it at the same time, but I need a little bit of a break, kind of, because they're very different.
Fantastic. Peter, what about you?
I'm gonna be in crime for a little while, I think now.
Crime fiction, that is, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, there's true crime's very compelling these days. Very topical. But the thing about crime is that it is amenable to a series. You're not just setting up a world; you're setting up a universe. Publishers love that.
And George is a great character, so why not?
I like him. And even some of the other characters that I set up, I fell in love with. So yeah, publishers like the idea of a series of recurring characters, intertwined storylines. You said, so you're setting up not just a world, but a universe that might take place over a number of books. Is very amenable to adaptation, to, you know, speaking with producers and directors and things that might end up on the screen. So yeah, it's a really compelling place. And when you write one book, it's also very daunting to go back for a second dip, especially if there's a contract there or an expectation. But just having the confidence in yourself to know that you've done it once and you probably can do it again. One thing that I find very interesting that I've heard about from people in the industry is that, you know, there is only so much you can do in crime. There's also many flavors, as we're finding out. But having those little wrinkles, you know, maybe an interesting setting, a place you're taking readers to that they haven't normally been to, that's something that makes a book stand out. Or a protagonist who's a little bit different, or the themes that you're writing about. So I think if you play with those, you keep the genre fresh for yourself, and you're able to deliver something similar but different, which is hopefully what people want if they've liked your first book.
Love it. Now we've got a few minutes left on the Words and Nerds podcast. I always ask this question last. So you got 30 seconds to tell me, Peter, why do you write?
Because I can't not write.
Oh, did it in 5 seconds. You want to add anything to that? You got about 15 seconds left.
Why? Yeah, because it's a creative outlet. It's a safe place. It calms me, and it's something that I'm proud of. And I've got 3 young children, and I hope I can inspire them and lots of other people who are emerging as writers to say, you know, you've got stories to tell, and you can do this too.
Beautiful answer. Kelly, why do you write in 30 seconds?
I guess it's just interesting. Like the actual writing process I find really difficult. And yeah, it's like pulling teeth sometimes, but it's just interesting. So even as I'm saying, why am I doing this? You just can't stop thinking about the ideas, I think, and the characters. So
I love that.
yeah, it's not that I could stop if I won the lottery, say, but I do really enjoy it.
Pamela.
Yeah, I couldn't. I write because apparently I get cranky when I don't.
Oh, is this the archaeologist's husband telling you this?
The archaeologist's husband, who is also a writer. So, you know, I'm afraid I've infected him with the bug as well. Yeah, I think it's an addiction, actually. And that's fine. It's a positive addiction. It seems to be reasonably good for me.
We don't want you to curb your addiction.
We don't want to curb it. No. No, I do think seriously that once you start writing and it becomes a part of your life, it is like any other kind of like running, or, you know, I used to be a runner and, you know, you had to go out for the run or you just didn't feel right. Well, writing is like that, you know, particularly because the ideas come and they're not going to go away. They just stay in your head and annoy you until you get them out. So, yeah.
Laura, what about you? Why do you write?
I guess number one, it's the thing I'm good at. I would love to be a musician or something, but you know, writing is just my thing that I'm best at. And it's just a place to put all the stuff, like stuff that's confusing me, stuff that's annoying me, stuff that's interesting or beautiful to me. Like it gives you an outlet for everything in a way to make sense of the world.
Beautiful. What wonderful answers. I'd love to hear from all of you too, if you write, why you do so as well. Now, all of our wonderful authors will be available to sign copies of their books opposite the library. I'm sure you've all seen that when you walk in across the bookshop. You will have to leave the room afterwards. I don't think there's a session in here afterwards. Oh, there is. So you have to leave anyway because they like to, you know, COVID clean it, etc. I hope you've really enjoyed your time here. If you can join me in thanking these wonderful humans on stage, Kelli, Pamela, Laura, and Peter.